Common sense is our business in the Conservative Party. Our approach is very simple. Axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime. Axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime. Axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime.
Yes, he can be annoying. There's a lot of sloganeering going on, it seems, for a lot of people when it comes to talking about Pierre Poilievre. But now there's a brand new book. It is called Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life by Andrew Lawton, who is on the line. Mr. Lawton, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you took a look back, starting way back, and as far back, I believe, as his first involvement in politics as a teenager. So for people who don't know, that's how he started out. Did we have a sense earlier on from what you've discovered here that he'd be in this for, basically in the game forever?
Well, as someone who was interested in politics when I was a teen, I can say generally that the ones who are not normal people. So generally speaking, if you do get involved early, I think there's a good indication it'll remain a part of your life, at least for a period of time. Now, that doesn't mean you're destined to become the prime minister or a leadership candidate, but he's definitely been a lifer. I found involvement going back to when he was 14 and just tagging along with his mother to political events.
So I wonder at what point did someone or did people within the party realize that, beyond him being a lifer, he's the kind of a guy who could go places, if you can put it that way?
Quite early. I mean, even his mother sort of signaled that she saw him as, achieving political greatness relatively early on. People around him that I spoke to, and obviously there's a bit of hindsight here, but they generally say that they're not surprised to see him having taken the trajectory he has on this. And one thing that I'll also point out there is that the things he's interested in, the things he says about politics have remained remarkably consistent. I found letters to the editor he wrote as a teenager, op-eds he wrote when he was 18, 19, and the message in it is pretty much identical to, what he's saying in that clip you played a minute ago and at other points in his political life now.
I would ask as well, I love some of the takes here. So interesting, of course, when you talk to people about Pierre Poilievre, you write, it's an unexpected virtue of the book. This was written about your book, discovering the enigma that is Pierre Poilievre. So what did you discover about that enigma that you can relate?
So it's interesting to see how much success he's had when there are some of these contradictions that I explore. For example, he's clearly a career politician. He's made his life in politics. He never really had a private sector career, but he's also tapped into so many of these ordinary middle-class complaints that Canadians have. And I think that in and of itself is a bit enigmatic. How does a guy who's had such an unrelatable life in many respects become so relatable to so many people, which the polling is showing?
Yeah, you also write, it says, Poilievre has been so shrewd and calculating throughout his political career that even his friends have wondered at times what's real and what's a persona.
Yeah, it's funny because on one hand, people around him say he's radically authentic. They say that what you see is what you get. And that was a general consensus among a lot of people. But I also had some that shared with me, even people that are, the one quote that you're referring to there is from a caucus member who have said that he loves the sport of debate so much. He loves the sport of it, the theater of it, that at times people do wonder, is this just a game to him, or is this really, an accurate reflection of who he is? And I don't think it's that people think he's dishonest, but that just that he's so polished about it. There's almost like a superhuman aspect to it.
And what about the fact that, around him, he still creates this uneasiness for a lot of people? Why is that, do you think?
Look, I think there are a lot of people. I think in general, politicians should give us a bit of uneasiness. I think liberal, conservative, whatever, we should all have a basic level of skepticism. But I think that there are a lot of people that have grave concerns with conservative politicians. And I'm talking about the media framing here, which is really what I think contributes to a lot of what you see in him that, people will say is icky or whatever. When people see him scrapping with journalists, when people see him really going for the jugular in question period. But I think what's different here is that when people are seeing Pierre Poilievre do these things, it's not really mean-spirited. He's not punching down, which is, I think, a concern that people have always had with other politicians. He's trying to really just engage in a way that he's not seeing the same sacred cows that other people in politics traditionally see, like the media, for example.
Well, let's talk about that. He obviously has, it would seem anyway, a loathing for much of the media, and I know a lot of that is focused on the CBC. Where does that come from?
I think if you canvassed a lot of conservatives, you'd find a general consensus there that they think the media is out to get them. And it's easy to make generalizations, and the problem with generalizations is that it doesn't accurately describe everyone in the media. There are plenty of fair-minded journalists that may themselves lean right. But I think as an institution, conservatives generally just don't like and don't trust it. And I think, Andrew Scheer believed that. Aaron O'Toole probably on some level believed it. Certainly the people around him did. The difference between those two and Poilievre is that they also still tried to play the media's game. They tried to be nice. They tried to win them over. Poilievre is the first conservative leader of that trio, and I'd say even Harper never really did this, to go on offense with them and to actually put the spotlight on them at a press conference or whatever and say, you have to defend this question. You have to defend the premise. And I think that in and of itself is where the underlying belief is the same as it's been, for time immemorial, but the tactic is very different.
Well, so how do you explain then that I guess now fairly famous situation where he's talking to a journalist in BC, I guess, in an apple orchard, and basically just destroys him? What was that about?
Yeah, I think the problem is that guy, and I feel bad for the guy because he becomes, no longer a human in that moment. He just becomes fodder for conservative fundraising. But the thing was, the questions were objectively bad. He's setting up all these premises, and, you're being Trump-like. Critics say this, but without being able to back anything up. And I think the problem there is that it becomes almost a straw man in a way, because conservatives get to hold him up as Exhibit A and extrapolate from him every journalist. He's just like the CBC journalist. He's just like Rosie Barton. He's just like you. And that's, I think, the problem there. So because it was just such a bad interview, it really fed into that existing conservative stereotype about the media, I think. And Poilievre, being who he is, in the midst of that, realized, hey, I can make this gold. I
want to ask one last thing, and I wanted to get to the question as well. For people, listening to this thinking, well, is this a book to basically make Pierre Poilievre look like he's perfect? It's not. You point some of the negative things out that he's gone through. You mentioned a situation I'd never heard of before, this dressing down one time from Stephen Harper that you write almost brought him close to tears. What was that about?
Yeah, it goes back to 2008 when Stephen Harper was delivering an apology on behalf of Canada for the residential schools program. And Poilievre, at the time, a 29-year-old member of parliament in the end of his second term, did an interview in which he basically stole the attention away from that apology by talking about, are we getting value for the money we're paying? And Indigenous people need to learn the value of hard work. And there were comments that, in a talk radio interview, if you listen to the full thing, you can kind of understand what he's trying to say. But they allowed for people to take clips out and really just say, hang on one hand, you have the Prime Minister that's delivering this momentous, historic, unifying apology, and then you have a guy poking holes in what the government is doing. And that really, really stole the attention away from what the Conservatives wanted to focus on, and the hammer came down quite hard on him.
So I would ask, as we wrap up here, for Canadians who might want to read this book or want to get a better sense of Pierre Poilievre, what will they discover reading your book? That he really is a nice guy, that he is who he appears to be in the House of Commons? Who is the real Pierre Poilievre?
You'll determine that he's all of those things and more. He's a family guy, but he's also a calculating political operative. He's someone with a middle-class upbringing, but he's also had a very unique existence. And, it's not possible to distill it down into a single line, which is, I think, all the more important to read the book and get a sense of, the complexity of him as a person and a prospective prime minister.
And do you sense he is the kind of person, I mean, if you look at the polls, if there was an election tomorrow, clearly he would win. Is he ready for something like that?
I don't know if anyone can be ready for something like that. I think you need people that are prepared to rise to the challenge. He rose up through the ranks of politics, as a young MP, becoming a cabinet minister, and has succeeded in that. So I certainly think he has taken on these challenges in the past, but I'd be very leery of anyone that said they were inherently able to take on the process of leading a country without any speed bumps.
All right, and we will leave it at that. The book is called, brand new book, it is called Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life by Andrew Lawton. Mr. Lawton, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.